recording now. Cool.
There it is.
Recording. Okie dokie. So here we are. Good afternoon. So this is Karen Dodd from Wise Women Weekdays, and today I'm joined by a fellow wise woman, Marianne.
Hello, this is Marianne from East Sussex.
And I'm over on the Isle of Wight, and today we're joined by Macdonald, who is the other side of the pond in Canada.
Yes, the other side of the pond and the other side of the sexual polarity as well.
Wow, you've gone straight for it, Andrew. I love this. You're saying you're a man and we're a woman. We're women. Is that what you're saying there?
Yes, that's the impression I'm getting. Yes.
I think so. I think so. Well, thank you for joining us. So today's sort of chit chat is kind of about not so much the polarity, but about where are the men in this topsy-turvy world?
Yeah. So what brings that question up for you, Karen, if I can ask that? Like,
Indeedy. Well, I think we had a couple of exchanges on email. I think I sent a newsletter out, and you replied saying hi from Canada, which is lovely. I love knowing that the word is getting out all over the world. And then I just looked at the bottom of your signature or your autograph, whatever we want to call it these days. And it led me into some of your blogs or podcast or the work, your writings.
My Substack, yeah.
Your Substack, that's right. And I scanned through a couple of them, and the one that resonated with me was like about the men. Where are all the men? I don't think that was your title. Was it your title? Maybe it was, but I just thought.
No, I don't think so.
No, it wouldn't be. So what was it? I mean, it's like it is kind of where are the men? I think what's happened here.
I don't know which post you looked at. I have been going back and forth between writing about about consciousness, the Great Reset, what's happening in the world, and individual waking up, and the whole men-woman thing, which I've been involved in for 30 years or so in men's groups, and given a great deal of thought to it. I had actually a man and a woman as parents, so the whole dynamic of where the men and women are in our psyches has been highlighted for me, and I've been working with that. I'm an old guy now, definitely well into elder territory, and I've been working on the man-woman parts of how they show up in my psyche and how they find balance and mutual respect between the two and a way to kind of be together. And so it's a deep, interesting question for me. I just one by detail is I was 40 when I first got into a men's group, and I had never talked about the truth of my life to anyone, man or woman, before that time. So I was 40 years old. So it was like roughly 40. So it was like, oh my God, I felt seen and heard in a way that I had never had before. It was absolutely life-changing. And there was a lot more that the group could there's a lot more exploration that's possible. It's kind of like opened a door, but that door goes on forever, and it includes men understanding their past as people interested in honor, in service to community, to family, to God, all of that, which is all historic stuff that's actually in our psyche. I believe, and that's largely been lost. The respect for it, or the sense that it's possible and okay, and to claim that for ourselves, that ancient sense of honor and value. It's like it's seen as being toxic, or it's not welcomed in the world, and most men have taken that on, and most men are, in my view, hiding or unaware that that is part of their heritage and part of their innate nature. And it's been going on for generations, probably for hundreds of years, but especially the last, 3 generations or so. So men today, and especially the young men, are very lost. They don't have a sense that they have value as a sex, and they can't put together their own individual nature into. They can't find themselves because they're lost in a forest without a name and without any clarity. So it's.
So may I
very-
ask you, Andrew, what took you to that gathering of men? You had 40 years on this planet without sort of going deep, asking these questions.
I was just going to ask the same question.
Yeah, like mine. Wise questions, wise women, Marianne. But yeah, what took you to that space?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly. I know why it was called, which was through a New Age publication in Ottawa, Ontario, and the Jung Society there, the local Jung Society, the women were doing a lot of things, and I think that the men, I was not in the Jung Society myself, but the men were feeling, oh, what about us? Why don't we get together and talk? And so 12 of us met, and it was a very intense numbers of early meetings as we tried to find out what we're doing. What is this? We developed a little ritual for ourselves with a candle, and we developed this ourselves, our own little structure for having a meeting. And there was an amazing amount. I was kind of a virgin in this territory, but it was an amazing amount of breaking through and of telling truths that had been completely hidden. And it was just a transformative event. And I went on to spark a men's publication called Everyman Men's Journal. We did 10 years to 10 years of print publication, exploring the whole terrain. And we had conferences for women and men and women, exploring what's happening in this arena.
So it was more like a sacred sharing of your lives.
It was a sacred sharing, explicitly called that. Explicitly, the group that I was in was not explicitly politicized, but when we did the men's journal, we tried to hold space for both, the soul values and the kind of the perspectives that Robert Bly had brought in, that men were not noticing that men were not showing up, and Robert Bly was wrote a book called Iron John, which was laid out a lot of this. It was a very big phenomenon back in the, I guess it was the 60s. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question about.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's interesting times, because I think it's also a cultural situation we're going through, because I have 2 young men. I'm the mother of two boys. They're in their 20s.
Wow.
And I've got three.
Wow, you guys. I have none.
Okay. But it's interesting, because listening to you talk, Andrew, it just came to me that it is kind of a cultural thing. Because if you go into the East,
it is a cultural thing.
Into other cultures, it could be Africa, or it could be the Middle East. They do seem to have a very separate role for a woman to play and a man to play. And I don't know if they all go through a rite of passage, but that's what we in the West seem to have lost. Instead, we sort of do other things with our young people, and the screen, the screen has, it seems, a lot to be part of that. I know that's worldwide. Everybody in the world seems to have a mobile phone. They might not have a pair of shoes, but you have a phone. I've been there, I've seen it in very poor countries. They don't have clothes, but they have access to a phone, which is very strange. And I think there was a certain man that we will be familiar with, which I won't mention any names, but I'm sure he said everybody should have access to a computer rather than good health and food and a roof over their head. So somebody is pushing this agenda of giving bones.
Whatever that could be. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's a very valid point, and that's why we're saying, where are the men? I mean, Marianne, how are your men coping in what's going on, and have they gone through a rite of passage, or are they a little bit lost? What do you think about this?
No, I don't think they feel lost, but I actually, because I live with my youngest son, and he talks, quite regularly about his world, at the moment, and how, like certain agendas, how hard it is for men, particularly white males at the moment, to, have certain ideas and certain values and not being judged for being white privileged and those kind of things. So we do have discussions like that. Yes. With the other two, well, my middle son has just become a dad, so he's very busy at the moment, with the father role. And but like even that, having two young children now, looking at where the world is going, he not so much, but his girlfriend is, and about their children. And yeah, my eldest one is in London, who I don't see as much. But yeah, he's quite likes his but I do realize that their lives are very different to how when we grew up, and we had partners, and yeah, I think it's a very different world at the moment.
It is. It is.
And I think also certain things have been put into place, whether it's deliberate or manipulative, I don't know. But if you think about the feminist movement that took place only in the 60s, I guess, and the advent of the pill, that obviously brought a lot of freedom for women, because they could take more control of their bodies, and they could also start to be more independent of the male. And I think with this feminist movement of we don't need men, that's the undercurrent, that's the impression that I got, was given out, we don't need men.
Yeah.
They kind of lost their role, and in many of these chats, this seems to come up, whereas I think it's really important that men do have a role, as women do, but we've said we don't need you to open the door, we can open it ourselves, we don't need you to lift up the chair, we can sit down, we've got legs, all these sort of things, and we've become so, so strong, I guess. You talk to women saying we don't need men, partly because certain relationships or bloody men, this, that, and the other, but that's put that aside. It's just generally the role for a man has been taken over by the woman, if that makes sense, to a certain
by the woman and by the state.
Yeah, by design as well. Yeah.
I think that's probably true. It's really hard for me to evaluate how much of it is by design, but it certainly is true, as you say. I think there seems to be a larger design function to it, because traditional values for men and women in the distant past, including in our own culture, of course, and in those other world cultures that you were mentioning, Karen, a while ago, that the men had a role in it, in the culture, and so did the women have a role. They knew what they were doing in life, and when a young boy or girl grows up, he or she would know how they were going to fit into the society, and they could kind of project that somehow, and they could sort of put it together with their own family story, how they're going to fit into this cultural story of man and woman. But that has been more or less completely turned on its head, and it is got a lot to do with the arrival of the feminist movement in the 60s or so, which I think that women and men have both been disadvantaged by that story. The story, I'm older than you guys, so the story came about, or the rise of the feminist movement had the kind of everywhere impact in the news and from the media, from the culture around, that COVID the COVID event had. It was like everywhere, and you couldn't, to stand up against it. It's to be, I mean, it's easier to be unvaccinated than to be a man in the 50s or 60s. Like you bought
Wow.
it, and I was a young man, and I wanted to be loved by women, so I completely bought that whole thing. Like it was like all service to, and I bought the mentality completely. It was very, very, this thought of taking value and pride and kind of leadership in being a man certainly didn't occur to me. I was a sensitive, I was the sensitive new age guy type, right? And so I bought into it completely for, maybe 20, my 20s, 30s. And I was unhappy with parts of it, and I saw imbalances, but I could not dare to speak about it or find a way. That's why when I found the men's group, but those were mostly the sensitive new age guys as well. They were professionals mostly who had turned 40 or 50, and they'd done it all. That what now? What else is there? They'd had the kids, they'd raised the family, they'd achieved probably their peak in their careers. And what else is there? What else is there? So they were going through a midlife crisis, if you like, or wanting to
Yeah.
find what else there was. And I was just going through a life crisis. I was still kind of stuck in some ways back earlier. But I'll just say that while we did a lot of connection and it was kind of like friendship and sharing of ourselves, we did not talk about feminism. We did not talk about our role in society. It was not safe for us to do it. I would call it a lack of safety. Most men were established as fathers and with wives in long-term relationships, and this is still seems kind of shocking to me, because I think it's still largely true, that they couldn't talk about the power balance between women and men, including in the group with other men. They would not go there because they would jeopardize their sort of stable thing that they had with their wives. So it was not safe to talk about it. And that was true, in my estimation, 30 years ago. And it's still true in men's groups now. Men will not talk about that well. I mean, there are places where they will, but mostly men's organizations and men's groups they emphasize sort of brotherhood and helping the individual man, but they don't have a political perspective. They won't take it, or they won't have a social perspective, like a wider social perspective. And so, and I'll say one more thing about this, because this is striking. It's really striking for me, is that if you don't have there's two ways for men to be. One is that they're proud of themselves as honorable, serving the community, serving their families, serving God. They're honorable. They feel like, yeah, we're in this together. They have something to fight for, right? We're fighting for this stuff. We're connected this way. So we belong to a tribe, and it's a good tribe, and it's a good team, and we love it. That is not, men don't have that there. So when you don't have it, what you get is individual men feeling broken and needing fixing. So then the groups focus on that. They focus on fixing men. And I don't think that men need to be fixed. They need to be connected with other men and connected with a social role and value. And that's still available to us, but it's not, but we can't go back. But we can still be fighting the good fight in this world of change that we're in. Men are needed in that. Our warrior capacities, our ability to be horizontally connected with other men and standing together and fighting the good fight, not fighting to help the community, which in a sense is the world at this point. So yeah.
Do you feel like that music in those days had a lot to do with that, and certain bands, and and how they sort of changed society? No.
I was a complete, I honor you British ladies, I was a complete Beatles nut, and I still am. So absolutely, they were so there at the exact moment of my awakening, but of my becoming an adult, or becoming an adolescent turning into a man. But that was more like party time, and it was part of, I would call it part of the new age. It was not actually a social awakening, not for men. It was more about licentiousness and more about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, which is not wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. But like also like at some of the events that we go to, some of the events Karen organizes, we've got Mark Devlin comes, and he talks a lot about what's been happening behind the scene, and how these bands are actually like set up to really create social change.
Like which create social change? You mean like
some of the big bands have been created to put together to create social change through their message, rather than
you mean sex, drugs, and which social change?
Yes,
drugs and rock and roll.
But it's a great point you've made there, Marianne. And it isn't just about the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's to influence people. I mean, I'm quite stunned about what you said, Andrew, to say that the feminist movement was something that wasn't talked about, or that it was pushed to such an extent, equivalent to what we've just gone through in the COVID years. That I didn't realise that. I don't know. I was too young, I guess. I mean, I was born in '63, so I just missed it. I was a child, so I don't know if it had the same impact in the UK. But from my
investment, absolutely,
it was worldwide, it was global. So
absolutely.
Again, that makes it even more apparent to me that it has been manufactured or manipulated as a means to
socially engineering, it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And what you're saying, Marianne, with the music, like the Beatles, if you look into Mark Devlin, he's quite an eye opener. And like the Beatles, you have a story to tell about the Beatles. It wasn't just getting out the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But you have Beatlemania, and you look at the footage of you weren't the girl going, ooh, but all the women, they were fainting, and nobody ever yet seen anything like that. But there's a reason behind it. It wasn't just. I mean, they're just okay. 4 Liverpudlians, 4 men, young men from Liverpool, quite good looking, with a different sort of music. But it's behind the scenes stuff is going on to create a different path. Social engineering, as Marianne says. It's really worth looking up. I wish I had some of his books here, but he's coming on the show. I'm going to be talking to him soon. I'll have to talk to him. Look out for it.
The whole issue, like I think we're in a lot of trouble now with the globalist agenda, and I would love to see men playing a role as men in that. Our warrior capacity and our abilities to, our historic and sort of in our psyche ability to stand up strongly against an enemy, and to be to work together and use all of our intelligence and our collective intelligence as men, as that we used to be hunters and work together as hunters and do really know how to live out there and to do work. But we need that quality from men now, and we need women, of course, as well. We need something like the kind of respectful and complementary skills that men and women have. Like we work together historically over hundreds of thousands of years, and with a divine source, if you like, we've been created to have certain natures and strengths. Our man's nature has been sort of knocked out in an early move. And it didn't just start in the 60s and 70s, and women are not are equally vulnerable to the problems from there. Women did not do it to men. Right? It's something. It's
Yeah.
a part of a larger
Yeah.
story. But I think that if that men reconnecting to men's traditional strengths and women's traditional strengths, and having those two as a kind of complementary whole, will be a formidable force against the globalist disintegrating our togetherness
I agree.
and our ability to
Totally. It's
love.
like, well, they say, I haven't seen it, I've not witnessed it, but if a car ran over a child, the mother would have the strength to lift the car up. That women are, and I think that's why the women have been driving this movement, especially women of a certain age, mainly it seems with children, because we have that, nobody's going to get their hands on my child. The children don't really know what's going on, or the young adults, the generations that are coming. And it is so important that we do come together in the masculine and feminine, and we work equally, because, and I think a lot of women have been quite happy with that. I'm quite happy with that. I'd love the man to, I'm craving that, to get the alpha male back. Let me be my feminine woman, allow me with my certain things that I can still do, which might be masculine.
Right.
I can
And
go
the
out
men are craving that too. The men are craving.
And I think it's just having that connection. But like you say, there's this innate, if a man will say, they'll open the fridge and say, where's the butter? Where's the butter? Okay. And they don't see it. They don't see the butter. And a woman will go along and say, well, there it is right in front of you. But, and then you have a row. But, yeah, but the reason is because the man is, he's the hunter, isn't he? So he's looking further around. He's not looking just direct. Whereas the woman is a nest builder. So she'll see sort of, she'll see things differently.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's a great example. I am that guy who doesn't see the butter.
Yeah.
And it's,
because our brains are wired differently, just because of those reasons. A man's supposed to go out there and see the animal, to hunt the animal, while we have the children to, and we have to make sure that every child is safe. And
that's right.
That's just, it's just the biological.
That's right. Yeah.
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 The difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you read the literature of the Homer and the great Greek stories and all of the stories of the past, it's from the men's perspective, it's very much about honor and pride and being able to do good work for that's super important to men. The loss of that sense of having a valued role, we're not going to do exactly what was appropriate 3,000 years ago in Greece or 2,000 years ago in Greece, but having a respect and a sense of having a good place to stand with other men and being part of that team or that tribe, we see it somewhat in the sports thing, is really important for men. It's not that they think they don't know it's important, right? We don't know it, but men come alive in a sort of way that the world needs, that women need, and that men need. And right now, the men are feeling, many feel, I notice this in groups that I'm connected to, is that men assume that it's going to be about fixing their individual problems, but it's the connection that makes us, and the role where we can show up and we don't need to be fixed. We don't need to be therapized in a world that's largely serves feminine modes of understanding. Yeah. And I'll just say, this has been at least this is old. It's not just since the 50s and 60s, but in the last 3 or 4 generations, I was there at the early part of that. And then those young men who grew up had children, and those children grew up and had children. So now we've got 3 generations that don't remember any part of what, or have no living experience of what that strength was. And it's very hard for them to, the young men have no and the fathers have little sense of what that was, right? Some individuals find their way, many individuals find their way anyway, but it's that connected spirit that is lacking. And the young people, it's so necessary for us to see ourselves as forming a new culture that can stand together and be of service in this time. That's my sort of, that's my mission, and I often don't even dare to kind of really say it, but that's what I think is very important.
That's a very important mission, Andrew. It's very important. I think also to remind ourselves that, you know, we are nature as human beings. Whilst we are still human beings, I realise that Elon Musk has put the first brain implant in this week. So let's see where that goes. But whilst we are still natural human beings and we're connected to nature, you know, I hope and pray that ultimately the young men will go back to nature once they get fed up of their Game Boys or whatever it is they're on, you know, all these things, these computers, these screens, Instagram, this Grand Theft Auto, all this stuff that has been pushed their way. Is there going to be a time that they're going to think, oh, I've had enough of this, I want to go and be a real man and go and climb trees? Or will they be so dumbed down? I mean, how do we bring our young men back into the world of the real world instead of the metaverse?
Yeah, and I guess at the moment it's schooling as well. You know, the danger of schooling and what they're telling young children at school these days. You know, that's like one of my friends, the grandchild just went home and said, oh, the teacher says today I can be a boy. You know, no, you're not a boy. You're a girl.
You're not allowed to say that now. I think it's a criminal offence, isn't it? If you tell your daughter that she's not allowed to be the opposite sex, I think that.
Yeah. So there's some very serious issues in the schools.
So to you know, respond to your question, or not to answer it, but a lot of basically, we men together and we women together and you women together, if you like, and then all of us together need to kind of hold an understanding that we can that some of those young men and girls can find, and I think it will change. I think there's going to be a transformation is underway. I think there's the caterpillar in the cocoon is going to burst out, but it needs our conscious work and connection and labor to do that. And it's men and women working together in a very important way. Wise women, you may know this, the men cannot really get it together without, or men's challenge is to take care of themselves and to meet the women. They don't, rightly or wrongly, men generally fear that it's not a safe place or it's not a welcoming place. They have that conversation. They're going to be labeled, and men fear it, rightly or wrongly, right? They've been acculturated to fear it, even though in their psyches and deep inside them, they have the knowledge and they have the wisdom, and it's innate. But so women have a role in men's support.
Totally.
Men have a role in women finding themselves. We cannot find ourselves without the other.
A very valid point, Andrew. I think it's creating a safe space for the men. And the reason I think us wise women got together is partly because women are the nurturers. We give birth to the children and we bring them up, and how we bring them up, as Marianne rightly said, through education, through the school system, or through our own belief system, which is really, really important. But I was brought up to think that the man was kind of stronger and the leader, and the man would always ask you to dance or ask if you wanted to have a drink. And I just assumed the men were confident in doing that. It's only as I've matured that I realised it takes a lot of guts for a man to go up and ask a woman, you know, do you want to dance or do you want to drink? Because you could turn around and say, no, thank you. And then they feel like an idiot and their whole pride and ego has been affected. And, you know, whereas the same would apply for women, but it's just been the role that the man has to always take the lead. And I think in this instance, women do need to sort of take the lead to give the men a safe space to say, come on, come out from hiding. We need you. We want you. Come back into your masculine role and do the work that you're supposed to be because you're a bloke, whatever that role is. I'm not saying go out fighting and being aggressive, because I'm not into that.
No, nor am I.
But in this
Not
country
am I.
now, in the UK, they're talking about conscription, about bringing our boys back, you know, and forcing them to go into the
Yeah.
army, which kind of makes me laugh, because if that's going to happen, some people probably will, because then maybe men will think, oh yeah, I've got a role, I'm going to go and be a soldier and go to war. Hopefully, they have got enough common sense to realise that, you know, they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. There's a lot of vulnerability involved for both sexes in showing up in this conversation.
Yeah.
The men are going to have to be vulnerable enough to really take care of themselves and say no, or find their own boundaries with women so that they can take care of themselves and be open to being with, right? And the women are going to have to be vulnerable too, or are called to show up with more than our society asks of them at this time, because women sort of get a free pass. You were the morally virtuous ones. You were wise and all things good. This has been the way for the last several generations. We see women's light side, right, and men's dark side. But so women get a free pass in a sense. So it's not, it's like counterintuitive to say, well, let me show you my dark side. Let me show you where I take, where I enjoy having more. I can judge you. I can, you know, we don't need you. I don't need you because I'm, you know, I'm sufficient unto myself. But women, I don't think that women or men can be fulfilled without the other. You know, we need each other in very, very profound ways. And women have got personal inner work to meet that. Men have personal inner work to meet that.
Yeah. I think unfortunately for the men, also on the dark side, there's far too many men, you know, pushing us into a certain direction.
Yeah, there's many women there too. That's a complicated conversation because men have, you know, there's a number of things mixed in there, but there are, it is, the global leadership may have men as front men more often, but there are many women in there, and the spirit of it is not to do with the spirit of men. It's to do with a kind of craziness, a shadow aspect that's come in that both men and women, I think, are party to. You know, the head of the EU is what's her name, Van Leyen there.
Van der Leyen, yeah.
Yeah,
Ursula von der Leyen.
Yeah, Van der Leyen, yeah. And you know, it is not, you know, our Canadian cabinet is largely part of the young global leaders part, and very, very prominently, our finance minister, has got a very prominent role there. Chrystia Freeland is there, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and you know, it is not. It's not men as men who were doing that. It's men who have part of the abdication of the traditional values of men and women.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a globalist. It's another level entirely, or it's another level of craziness. Yeah.
No, you're totally right. It is. Sorry, Marianne, did you want to say something on the back of that?
No. I just said absolutely.
Yeah, it is, and I think the shadow work has to be done. You know, we can't blame women for making this feminine thing. You know, because we just thought we saw it as a meal, not a meal ticket. We just thought, I guess. Well, I wasn't there at that time, but if we had been suppressed, as I think a lot of women are still very bitter and angry because of the suppression that they felt, you know, ancestrally. I can go back to my grandparents, my grandmother, and what she had to put up with through, you know, physical violence and stuff like that. And then you can look at the witches movement and, you know, various religions, and even now going again into the Eastern cultures where women are not allowed to express themselves through clothes. They have to hide under a Dalit, you know, uniform, a black gown. Some women say, oh, I'm cool with that. I thought, really? Probably because you've not had the opportunity to be, you know, empowered as a free woman. So I think a lot of women, I know a lot of women are still angry by that and saying, well, we've been suppressed and now it's our time to shine. But again, it's kind of social engineering. You know, we really need to all access the shadow side of us, men and women, deal with that, really deal with that. And then as women, wise women, to embrace the young man and all the older man and say, it's okay, come out, you know, stop hiding, be the man, say what you want about us with respect, kind of thing. But we need you, we want you, come back and step into your shoes and step into your role as a man. We want that. I'm desperate for it.
Yeah.
To be honest, not just on a personal basis, but to help this situation.
Yeah. And it's a, you know, it's a complex conversation, because women also will, in order for that to be true, will need to find some connection to their ancestral values as well. We can't demonize it all as being oppression, in my opinion. It's women having been oppressed. Both men and women suffered a great deal in the past in order to survive and to raise the children and to do. They did what had to be done in our evolving world of consciousness and finding ourselves. Both men and women, I think, had you know, it was not easy street for the men and hard street for the women. It went both ways, and we have a story about it now that's partly informed by you know, the feminist movement. It's a partial story. It's a partial story.
It's interesting because you've kind of opened my eyes up to that, actually, because again, I you know, as Karen, I wasn't a witch a couple of 100 years ago. Well, maybe I was in a previous life, but I don't recall that. Maybe I was, I don't know. But hearing what you're saying, both sexes have a part to play in that era as an example. Like, you know, when the women were being drowned, you know, I would have just said bloody men, typical bloody men. But you're saying, you know, men, maybe you didn't want your wife drowned or your daughter drowned. So you would have been affected as well. And I've never really looked at it on you know, from that angle as a man, what was going on with the suppression of women, because maybe men did want to stand up and say no. So again, what's going on now? Men do perhaps want to stand up and say no. So
yeah.
You know, we have to give them that space to do it. We have to give them the confidence to do it.
Well, yeah, women have a role in it, but they have their own role for their own confidence and their own groundedness. Women can't give men confidence because it puts them in a one-up position. Men cannot take it from men. Men cannot receive confidence from women. They have to claim it for themselves, and the women have. So we have to meet in a very delicate area in which we respect each other's nature and find a way towards it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do we do that? Just because I'm wary of the time now, just to solve this whole solution, Andrew, in an instant, how can we do that? Is it through meetings, through gatherings? Is it like bringing the men into, you know, their band of brothers and discussing things, or do the sisters come in and we chat about it?
Yeah. Well, I think what we're doing right now is really helpful, actually. I really appreciate that you invited me over to do it. I think this is a really great start, and there's so much depth in it because our whole lives are really caught up they're really expressions of this, from one way of looking at it, expressions of this dysfunction that we have in society around what's it mean to be a man? How do we do it? What's it mean to be a woman? How do we do it? So it involves the very depths of ourselves. It's identity issues that we learn, that we're learning something that's new and important. We're sort of like, it's a very tender moment. How can we find our way together? I think it involves men talking amongst themselves, exploring, seeing that they are good, they don't need to be fixed. It involves women seeing that they've got a role in how it is with men, and then finding a way to meet together. I hope to be part of that conversation, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just thinking, Well, my head's risen off already because I can see this as one means to a solution. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Marianne, being, you know, on a female as well, but just the fact that women talk, we chat, you know, that's why we set up this group, because we can chat about everything and anything. It could be literally, you name it, and we could talk forever. Whereas men tend not to do that, do they? Men, you know, there used to be a real men don't eat quiche, but real men don't cry and all that kind of stuff. The men had to stand up and be these warrior kind of things, but you're human. And I think when women get together, we bitch about men. We might say an occasional nice thing, but normally it's not always pleasant. We're moaning about, oh, he did this again, and it's always negative. But I think it's really very important, you know, as we get some wise women that can cope with these conversations, to bring them into the band of brothers and say, okay, this is how I feel as a group. How do you feel when the witches were being burned? How dare you? That was my great-great-grandmother. How did you feel? You know, were you the one that dunked her, or were you the one that said, don't do it? To have these and I'm just talking as an example, you know, because women think we've been suppressed by the men, but, you know, what do the men think about that?
But I also think that in nature, you know, because a lot of these things are sort of natural. Like, for instance, if I look at my work, a lot of the young women that all start having children all have to go back to work because they just can't afford being a mum and being at home. But their desire is to be home and to be a mum, especially in those early years. But I think in time, hopefully those situations are created again, you know, that mums can be mums again for, you know, even if it's only till they go to school, those first early years. And, you know, where the dads are the providers, you know. And I also think that by having children at home in those early years, you know, important values stay sacred rather than putting them in child mindings from like really early on, when their minds get like programmed to think in a certain way.
I think, again, a very valid point, Marianne. And you could look, is it social engineering again? What has changed so that both parents had to go to work, or was it a choice? You know, has it manipulated a lot of? I don't know. I was fortunate enough to be able to stay at home, and I had a business that I could, you know, run. But I wanted to stay at home and bring my children up. And I know a lot of women that still want to do that but can't, because they just can't afford to. So it goes back to those bills, doesn't it? those good old bills, the taxes that we pay. But
but I stayed at home rather than have a career. And although I totally enjoy what I'm doing now, but my eldest son has said, oh, you should have had a career, and you should have. I said, yeah, but that meant you would have had to go to a childminder from 8 o'clock, and the childminder would have taken you to school, and the childminder would have picked you up from school. Well, now I was there. You know, I was there to support you and take you to your clubs and all that. And he doesn't see that yet, but, you know, he's 31. But hopefully one day he will see the importance, how, you know, it has turned him into a stable young man, you know? Yeah.
Well, a lot of food for thought here.
There is, and maybe I'd be happy to talk further if that.
Definitely. I'd love to have you back on, and we'll have a chat. I think lots of food for thought here, though, and it was just basically on your reply to my newsletter, and then I thought, oh, interesting. I'm just reading your Substack, and here we are, which is wonderful. So thank you for replying to me or sending me an email. Thank you for coming.
I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I did. I really think it's a fruitful place, and we're kind of planting a seed of more conversations between our two great sexes.
Yes, and it's nice to know that there's a mature male, you know, being, you know, considering all these important values. Absolutely.
And sowing seeds and. So just to end, you know, anybody watching these chats, if you do like it, please press the like button and subscribe and share so we can sow more seeds, because that's kind of what these chats are all about. It's just getting information out and communicating, you know, with people from all over the world. That's the beauty of Zoom, the fact that we can do that. It's what, 9-10 o'clock in the morning for you, I think?
Yes, it's 10:30. We started at 10:30. Yeah, 5 hours behind you.
Right, okay. But I mean, that's great. So we can talk, you know, at civilized time. So love to have you back on again, Andrew. And Marianne.
Yes, lovely to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marianne.
And
Thank you, Karen.
yeah.
And put my Substack address into the liner notes below.
Definitely.
So people can, because it's really about seeds, and I feel I feel I'd love support from any listeners and from you guys, just to kind of continue the conversation about how we can support the culture, men and women coming together for the
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll put your details down there. Okay, so lovely. Thank you so much. Enjoy the sunshine or the snow. Is it snow? It's sunny where I am. Is it snowy over there?
It is. The snow's on the ground, but it's not terribly cold. We've only had one or 1.5 sunny days in the last month. So it's very great. Very great.
Well, it's coming. It's coming. We're February. February's a short month, and the
spring is coming. Spring is coming.
Spring is on the way.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
maybe spring for us too, for the sexes.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you,
nice
guys.
to see you, Marianne.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.